So call the meeting to order, and then first order of business is, I guess, vote on the minutes or approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Yes, which I realize I think I left off the agenda because I didn't have it on the education one, but yes, let's do that.
Okay. So do I need to make a motion to approve last month's minutes? Or has everyone had a chance to look at that?
Yeah, I'll move to approve, Adam.
Approved by Brian. Do we have a second?
Is that Matt?
Yeah, I think that's a second.
It sounds, I don't know what's going on with your audio. It sounds like a chipmunk. But we'll take it as a second.
Okay. So the meeting or the minutes from last month's meeting, much better, have been approved. The next thing on the agenda is old business. And we talked last month about a few of the different items we were looking to discuss in this committee. The one thing that we kind of slated for this meeting was to talk a little more about capture rate studies. I could, and Karen, I'm hoping you can speak a little bit on that.
Yeah, I can.
I'd also like to just to kind of give me a broad overview of exactly what you mean when you say capture rate studies, like following people around collecting stuff and then analyzing that material. Just I think any information you can provide on that would be helpful to everyone.
Yes. And yes, because it's been a while. You know, we found an old presentation, but it was from 2021. So, you know, even if we've talked about it before, it has been a while. So I pulled out a few things to share. I'll share my screen in just a second. Just to let you know, though, as far as experience goes, I have not experienced a capture rate study on like a city scale or even a neighborhood scale. But Diane and I and Pete led a capture rate study in a downtown metro building. They're on the wet dry program, but we decided to kind of try out a capture rate study and see what kind of data we could find. So so I can talk about that a little bit as we go. But so I'm going to share this. This is actually a PowerPoint in a PDF form. So I think at one point that says it's a video, but it's not. That came from the Recycling Partnership about capture rate studies. So basically it's data that's going to help improve recycling. And I'm going to skip some of this stuff. So there's waste composition studies where you're really just looking at what is in your waste stream. And then there's capture rates, which can have a focus based on a program, on a specific commodity, on behavior, and I guess they're kind of versatile. But so like a waste composition study would just tell you just what's in your waste stream. And then you would get like a recycling rate. So this is not, if you look at this image, this is like not what capture rate does. So if a household has 800 pounds of recyclables, 1,200 pounds of other, they have 2,000 pounds total of waste. And they know that they recycled 400 pounds of it. So they have a 20% recycling rate. But when you do capture rate, when you know that these amounts here, that you had 800 pounds of recyclables in all of your waste, but only 400 pounds went into recycling, that's when you're getting that capture rate, which is actually 50%. Okay, so it's a little bit different than just a recycling rate. You're really just taking all the and that's where you have to look at trash and recycling to get a capture rate, because you have to know what's going into the trash as well as what's going into the recycling. So like with our wet dry program downtown, we have a black bag, clear bag system. So anything in black bags
Yeah.
is considered trash.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Anything in black bags is considered trash, and then anything in clear bags would be going to the recycling facility
Good.
and have that potential to get recycled. So we were able to, we at downtown, we opened up all the bags, but we kept, you know, we were able to know how much was found in black bags versus how much was found in
Yep.
clear bags. So if anybody put recyclables into the black bags, it was kind of
Correct.
like putting it into the trash. Okay.
Yes.
Let me see. Here we go. Okay. So so this is, again, I think this is a video that I can't play because it's just a PDF, but I would say Diane, don't you think that kind of looked like what we looked like when we did our capture rate study?
It did, except for the hazmat suits.
Right, we didn't have hazmat suits.
We
But
had
we did
aprons.
have a whole bunch of little tubs. We labeled them all the commodities that we thought we were going to come across. And we had a scale going and a spreadsheet, a computer, so when we finished, we would weigh each commodity, and Pete had made a great spreadsheet for us. So so it's not something that like we could do it on that kind of a scale, but like I said, I've not experienced this on a large scale like what we would be doing if we were looking into samples from trucks or a whole cart at a house. It's a lot different. So I'm gonna just tell you that some of these slides, I don't really know what they said when they originally gave us this presentation. But I do have another document I'm gonna bring up here in a second. So we'll just kind of look at these pictures. Like that's cart-based auditing. I think they're looking in the carts, whereas this would be collecting everything. And then they're tagging it with the address it came from if you want to, really track down to that detail. So they have all these samples and tarps, and they're sorting it again. And then you're going to get, so you have all the possible materials, then you have percent captured. So this is the data that comes out. And I guess from something I looked at, I think some of these facilities maybe aren't able to recycle things that are bagged at all. So that's where even if it went in the recycling, but it was bagged, some of them were kind of counting that as not captured. Even though I think at least with West Rock, I believe that it would still be considered captured because they have the bag opener thing. And then they had these contamination categories. I guess you can either choose what you're looking for or just whatever comes out when you're really doing your sort. So some of the cities that have worked with the recycling partnership on these capture rate studies are pictured here.
Ask a quick question real quick, Karen.
Yeah.
So in order to do an accurate capture study, and let's just say you were trying to do it for one individual's household, you would essentially, and that individual, let's say, had recycling, has, let's even say yard waste, and then has trash, their normal trash. In order to do an accurate capture rate study, you would have to study all three or everything that they are disposing of at that time in order to determine like what's still in their trash that could have gone into recycling, what's in the recycling that could have gone, that should have gone into trash, what maybe got
Right.
mixed in with the yard waste. So,
Yeah,
And
we
it-
probably wouldn't do yard waste.
okay,
I don't
yeah, or
think.
just, yeah,
But,
it-
but
that could be an item that's mixed in with trash that you could say could have been, something better
Yeah,
composted, something else done
composted,
with
yeah.
that. Okay.
yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was
Mhm.
clear on that.
Yeah,
That you
that's
weren't
what's-
picking just the trash or just the recycling. In order to do a captive study, you'd have to look at both of those things together.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So in this case, they did 4,500 homes. They did a capture rate study as a baseline, and then whatever they were trying to
Excuse
do,
me, who is they?
all of these cities.
Oh,
The
I'm
recycling
sorry.
part-
I thought, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this, like I said, this is the recycling partnerships presentation, so
Okay,
I'm
got
doing
it.
my best here.
Got
But yeah, they implemented some kind of strategy, and here in a second there will be more images to show what those things are, like if they're trying to eliminate bags from their recycling, something like that. So they'll do their mailers and their education, some kind of campaign, and then they'll do another capture rate study to see if they were able to change anything. So that's like for Atlanta, for example, I guess they send an annual info card. They did the Oops Tag program, and they picked one issue, like do not bag your recyclables. That's what they chose as their top issue. They did a mailer for that and some signage. So that's kind of that strategy that was implemented between the capture rate studies. So then you can see, like, they were really trying to get people to not bag their recycling. So before, if 17% of it was in bags, it went down to 6% in bags. Or you can look at it as they captured 66% of the recycling, whereas before they were just capturing 52%. And then this is other commodities, just metal, paper, plastic, or glass. So their big thing was to try to get people to recycle items loosely. And then so they have these full results here. And Atlanta even had high income versus low income, as far as looking at how their messaging worked. So these are just examples of cities and how they've used capture rate studies.
Do we have a specific issue that we are looking to gain information on through this capture rate study? Like you were showing, the one is their goal was to not bag the recyclables.
Right.
Is there something that we along those lines are trying to find out or make happen, or is that you're aware of, or they're just an overall take a look at what's going on?
I don't know. That would be questions that would involve our recyclers. So whether it's just West Rock, or if we're going to include areas that have Rumpke or whatever, that would be part of the conversation as we get into the details of writing the RFP. And I don't think, besides just showing a lot of statistics, like Denver, for example, they found that a lot of their cans were either not recycled at all or they were bagged. So they put out some specific information about cans. So anyway, let me also show you this one. Okay, this is much more boring because it's all words, but can everybody see it? Okay. This is a document that the Recycling Partnership had also sent us about kind of just like it says, it's a quick guide so that figuring out how you want to go about getting this done. Let me see if I highlighted some things. Let's see. Okay, so selecting your method here, deciding whether you're doing cart-based analysis or back of truck analysis. And this gives a little more information about that. And this might entail having, you know, when we make these decisions, we may need someone with some experience behind it to explain it better, but I can send this document to you all too. I didn't really look at it closely until today, so I didn't realize it was something I should have sent you all beforehand. But this cart-based are also known as participant capture studies. So you're not really getting people who don't recycle. Whereas a back of truck study is going to be more all-inclusive, even if people aren't participating in recycling. So it just sort of depends on what kind of data you want to see. And let's see, what else did I? So if you're using the study to look at contaminants, you know, you might want to be deliberate about what categories to use. So getting guidance from your MRF as to what they think is most problematic would be good. And then any contamination reduction campaign should be preceded by a capture rate study. So here's, when I was reading that, my thought is, okay, we have this Field Trip is our vendor who's doing, right now we're doing an anti-litter campaign, but we want to do future campaigns about recycling, and we'll probably end up doing one before we get a whole capture rate study done. But when I think of it that way, it might be more of an awareness, you know, start kind of low. And then if we can get a capture rate study done, then we can have another recycling campaign really hit home on some issue that we find through the study. And then they actually have on this document some suggested content for an RFP. So that's basically what this, you know, subcommittee here is going to help do, is make sure that we try to kind of figure out what are our, you know, objectives, what's the scope, anything we want to ask these consultants that are going to help us, you know, what do we want them to do, what kind of timeline. It's on the next page. You know, you can be very specific on when you want something done, how much experience they have in doing a capture rate study, what kind of data do you want to receive from them. And the rest of the document is more about categories, which is important, but maybe not just yet. So, but I'll send this out to you all so you can look at it a little closer. But I thought that was a good tool that could be used as we do this. We were just in, what connection did I make? In the education meeting, we were talking about, you know, just the education things that we want to do as far as recycling goes. So doing a capture rate study just really will help us decide, you know, what kinds of education we need to do, especially if it really hones in on some specific issue that we find.
So it sounds to me like in doing the capture rate study, it's most effective if you do a capture rate study, then you hit them with education and try to focus on that same area with some sort of education and some sort of goal to improve in that area. And then you follow that up with another capture rate study, and that helps you understand or determine how well things improved, got worse, better. So
Yeah,
it's
how effective
how
education
effective
was.
your education was. So it sounds like the capture rate study almost has to work in conjunction with the education committee in determining what goal you're working towards. Does that sound right?
Yeah,
Or
it kind of, I would say, and I don't know that, I guess Bruce Burrows here, I was trying to think of, we can invite, MRF representatives to help, figure out if there's a certain contaminant that we're looking at. But I would kind of like a capture rate study to really get all the data, so that we can figure out from that how we want to target education. Because you don't know till you do it, as far as if there's a lot of one commodity that ends up in the trash, like I was kind of surprised with Denver and their cans, but I also hadn't read part of that is also just being bagged. And I don't know, I guess that's another question for the MRF, but I don't think Westrock would consider bagged recyclables as not captured at all. I don't know who I don't see my list very well. There you are. Bruce, do you have any comment about that? Like, or if Rumpke and other cities have done any capture rate studies, if that was a thing?
I know we have done some other studies in cities. Have you spoken with Hillary regarding this topic as well as education?
Sorry, say that again. Have I spoken to Hillary about what?
About this topic, the capture rate studies as well as the education component?
I haven't talked to her specifically about capture rate studies. No.
Okay, I will. There's another lady I'll involve as well. And try to get some information, feedback from them.
Because I know you guys might have done some things in Columbus or Cincinnati or something.
We did a lot of oops tags, a lot of education work in Columbus, obviously in Cincinnati, it's continual education. But I'm more excited about what they're doing in Columbus, Ohio, now with the big investment that we're making there and the improvements that we're making to the system in Columbus. So
yeah,
I'd like to get some input from that area as well.
Okay. Let's see. So I think in this case, I mean, I'm not really sure what else we can talk about specifically. I feel like this document here is going to be very helpful. Oh, there's one more thing. I'm gonna stop sharing because it's a Word document. Hold on. Let me see.
how do you determine what area and how big of an area to even start or even what area, how big of an area, who's collecting it now? I would think all those are going to be important questions to figure out. For one, I would think the larger area you try to do, the more cost that would be associated with that.
Right.
And I would say depending what area you choose to survey, there would be some differences in your capture rate studies too. So
Yeah, and Pete might have more insight on that, as far as, because I feel like he's talked about it before, like if it's samples around, but this, and I'll send this to you all too if you'd like to see it, but the Recycling Partnership shared this RFP for Minnesota, and just to get an idea of the specifics that they're asking for. This one's a little different than what we're doing because they were actually testing the difference. It was like a baseline while they used bins, and then they did it again when they used carts because they wanted to know if their contamination increased or anything like that with more capacity. So it was very, very specific to the impact of carts on their contamination. But I think it's still a good example that has some of the pieces that are listed in that quick guide are in here. So you can kind of match that up and see. And even though ours wouldn't be exactly like it, but sorry, did someone say something?
do we have, like, are there any specific complaints from the collectors that they're looking to have addressed, or because it sure sounds like we do need to have some kind of specific task or issue that we're trying to solve. And I would think that that issue would come from the current collectors saying, this is an issue, that's an issue, and what can we do to fix these issues? Like you said, bagging the recyclables or cart versus can.
In my
So-
opinion, though, it would come more from the facility that's sorting it. So what gives them problems at the sorting, or maybe stuff that they can't recover that just get, like styrofoam, for example, is something that I know Laura and Kim have spoken about as, and plastic grocery bags are kind of the top two for them as far as contaminants that they get in there and they just can't get recovered, and they blow everywhere and might cause problems. So I think it depends on that facility, and I think that would be a question to bring them in on when determining that. The haulers might see some things, but if it's not a problem with the facility, then then it doesn't really matter, I guess.
I can speak for, I know we have problems with bag recyclables, obviously,
Mhm.
organic generation. And out of the goodness of their heart, people try to recycle items that may be recyclable, but not suitable for residential recycling, like Low-Tex toys. Those normally all get thrown off the line at the initial picking station, just because of the size, not being able to travel through the optical sorters. So, there are some educational components that we can bring to bear here.
This is Pete. Number one, I apologize for being late. Number two, I think that just hearing the short amount of conversation that I've heard, one of the other goals of this is, well, to better our education and to get things in the right container. And that means stuff out of the garbage and into the recycling stream, things in the recycling stream out of there and into the garbage where it belongs. So we're not just trying to solve issues, we're also trying to increase the amount of recyclables that we're collecting through this understanding individual behaviors, and such as this capture rate study would show us.
Can you all, because I think this is important, can you explain to me again, how I think you call it home rule cities and not being in the home rule city, how that works? So there's certain areas of Jefferson County that Louisville Metro pays for and picks up their trash and recycling. And then there's other areas throughout the city that their own city uses an outside hauler to do that. Or
Yeah.
does
Yeah, I can break that down a little bit. So you have municipal collection, which is done by a governmental entity such as Louisville Metro in the Urban Services District and in the city of Shively that has its own employees collecting waste. Then you have a series of home rule cities that can contract from licensed haulers. Licensed meaning they have to be licensed to operate by the Waste Management District, us. When I say us, that means the board. They have to be licensed. So as long as they use a licensed person, they can contract how they wish. And most of the time, not all home rule cities have done that. Some of them leave people on subscription service. And then the third part, which is the biggest part of the county, which is the subscription area, meaning that an individual waste resident has to get a subscription from a waste hauler. And in that regard, you can have multiple haulers on the same street collecting the material. So most of them are kind of, they're done by one. Some areas it's done by multiple.
Okay, so in that being said, and just trying to even determine where or what is going to be the best area to do a capture rate study, I mean, it seems like it would be more beneficial to the city to do it in the area where they're already doing pickup, or like if like I said, Bruce, if Rumpke's doing a certain area and they keep continually having a problem with a certain thing, they would let us know that. I'm trying to, in my head, figure out and justify where's the best area, or why would this area be better than another to pick to study.
So if I could again, when you have the ways that it's collected isn't necessarily how we need to choose a location. Some of it can be chosen by socioeconomic background, and because their problems are different than some area that is a very high recycling participation area. So it could be that those two individual areas have a totally different behaviors when it comes to recycling, and we can identify the right message for each of those areas. One is to reduce contamination and increase recycling. The other one, the primary thing, is to increase recycling and to get much cleaner material. But the message to do that is totally different. If you're trying to sell a message to one part of town versus another part of town, the way you do that is a little bit different. It might be the same material, but the message is a little bit different too. So what I envisioned was a high recycling area that can be in the Highlands. That could be in a home rule city. It can be in an HOA. It can be done by people that are ecotech, working with Ecotech to do it, or Rumpke, or whoever. It could be the city as well. Where it gets hard is when you're in that subscription area and you have the area becomes much bigger because you have multiple haulers on the same street. So it's just a little bit harder to do. But I think that there would be some benefit there if we could find the right place to do that, even in the subscription area.
So do you suggest in doing some type of capture rate study, selecting maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 different areas, and just getting a baseline or an initial evaluation off of those 4 or 5 different areas? And then once you've received that information, then you determine which area maybe needs education the most, which area is doing well, and there maybe isn't a huge cost benefit to focusing on this area, or is that kind of how you envision that happening?
I wouldn't envision 4 or 5. I think that at most 3, and you can just about do it in steps. Do one area, see what your results are. Do a second area and compare. And if your results from the second is just like the first, and these are very different types of areas, then you might not even need to do the third. So you only go as far as you need to. I can think of another area that you might want to do it is in an area where language is a big barrier. And, because that is that's a challenge. I can tell you, we have one of those areas in the USD, and it is very much a challenge.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
What areas we focus on, Pete? I know if we're focusing on the urban services district and the contracted areas, those should somewhat go hand in hand, because most of the contracts include recycling, if not all. But you mentioned certain parts of the unincorporated or subscription-based areas, if you will. Is there certain areas that you've identified to focus on?
No, I think that we would want recommendations from the haulers. If there's an area in the subscription part of the county that has, like, one hauler has a really high concentration of houses in that area, it makes it easier to do. So you guys know where your subscriptions are better than we do by far, obviously. But we're asking for haulers' help in deciding where we would want to do that and what they think would be our benefit of doing it there.
Yeah, I would think there would need to be some rhyme or reason to why we would select a certain area, or again, the hauler says, hey, I see all kinds of cans in their trash in this area every time we're picking this up, or I don't know. I'm trying to, in my head, determine how you would select that.
Yeah. So Brian and Bruce, do y'all have a particular part of town where you feel like that recycling is great, and then another part of town where you guys really struggle?
I'm sure if I get with operations, we can identify certain areas. I know Prospect is a very good recycler, and City of J-Town, and they are very progressive in recycling. And I would have to get with operations to see, and some of the problems to respond to Adam's point, and with regard to what do we see as a driver. Unfortunately, now with the side load automated 95-gallon cart for recycling, the driver doesn't get to see much other than the bin can camera and when it goes into the car, into the truck. So it's not like we get out and look at inside every recycling cart before it's empty. So I'm sure there's areas where I can get with thoughts and they can identify some opportunity. But we do have some very good, strong municipal contracts with recyclers that I would rate among the best.
So,
I was gonna mention, Pete, you alluded to this, but we're talking, Adam, about two different things. A capture rate study is the study to determine what materials at a location or at a route, and I'm gonna use a location because it's better for the description. You go to a home and you see what's in the trash that should be in the recycling. So you're actually going back to that description Karen gave us earlier. That is the definition of the way to evaluate a capture rate. When we're talking about contamination, to me, I would start on the back end. Pete mentioned this yesterday, that we don't have much contamination in our area. But what contamination we do have, Andy mentioned earlier that Nashville was 42%. I wouldn't think that West Rock and Rumpke are seeing anywhere close to 42% contamination. Bruce, I hope you'd agree with me, at the recycling centers. So that particular component of an evaluation would be, what are we seeing in the contamination from the market area in general? That from an educational perspective, we could identify that before we did a capture rate study. In other words, what materials do we see that are contaminating the recycling? Do you agree with me, Bruce?
Well, I would agree with you and add that a capture rate study and a participation rate study are two totally different items.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And
One thing-
Andy's on here too. Andy was referring to that from Nashville during the last subcommittee meeting.
okay, I didn't see Andy there.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to comment on that, Andy.
Oh, no, nothing. I mean, nothing really added. I do think that, I mean, not that it should take the place of a capture rate study or anything like that, but I do think we have an opportunity to potentially work backwards from both the MRF and potentially someplace like the WRC. I know that, it's difficult because some loads are commingled there, but I know Metro, Resi trucks do go there, especially toward the end of the day. If it's just saying, okay, what are you seeing that's in the trash that should be recoverable out of the MSW stream at the WRC, and looking at West Rock and saying, what is contaminant? What are our biggest contaminants there?
Right.
And then it at least gives us something to focus on the capture rate study. And you still might find things that surprise you, when you're looking in containers, but it at least gives you a little bit of a focus going into it.
Yeah, from the contamination perspective, I could answer that question. It's garbage bags. That's the number one thing that the facilities ask us to keep out of the, the recycling toters. And I can see, having toured a number of those facilities, what a problem that is at the processing facility.
So I think that we're all around this thing. What we typically do in a lot of our recycle right things is we know an area, we want to see what that area is doing. We do an audit of it before we even start. If we do, and we don't have to do a full audit, if we've got a route that we think, let's look at that area, you can have that truck dump separately, and you can do just a visual of how that stuff looks and get a pretty decent idea of how things are going, a decent idea, and decide, yeah, that's where we want to do our capture rate study, or man, that's awful. That's where we want to do our capture rate study. So, I think Andy's right as far as how we could work this and decide. We can decide by visual audits of material and where it comes. We can base where we want to start looking by some characteristics of the area, meaning where there's language barriers could be one, which I prefer to have some place where there's the language barrier issue. Another area that's social economic, Newburgh could be a place, an example of that. and then a high recycling participation area. And that could be a home rule city such as J-Town, or it could even be in the urban services district in the Highlands. We need to erase the lines and figure out where we need to go to get the best message, best information for our education.
I think it would be interesting to look at Prospect versus J-Town, because Prospect still utilizes the 18-gallon bib, whereas J-Town is a 95-gallon cart. And I think we've, obviously had a cleaner recycling stream with the 18-gallon bib, even though it's less volume and it was high labor intensive. But, how do we get to that quality in a 95-gallon cart would be the goal. And Prospect versus J-Town would be a good comparison.
So again, I apologize for not being here for the full meeting. Are we leaning towards whether, or the first question, are we going to do a capture rate study? And then number two, if we're going to do it, how we're going to do it? Have we decided that we want to move forward with it?
I think in order to move forward with it, we need to have a purpose. Like I said, carts versus bins, trying to get the bag trash out of it. I don't know that. I guess if you just randomly, or not randomly, but say we determine these 3 areas are where we would like to check out. Once you check that out and determine what you have, then what are you trying to do? I almost think if you had a goal or something you were trying to accomplish before you even did the capture rate study, you would progress towards something versus just random, not random, but just gathering information.
I don't disagree with that, Adam. I think that any specifications that's going to be written has to have that goal of what we're looking at in there anyway, to let any vendor know what we're after. So maybe that's our first step, is writing our goal of doing one of these and making sure that we're all on the same page with that, and we're all understanding it. Would that be a place to start out and go to create that mission statement? And we can have multiple statements for different areas of town. I don't know. I'm just thinking outside of the box here.
May I make a recommendation?
Sure.
Karen shared some information from the recycling partnership early in the presentation, Pete. And I feel it's important that everyone at least have the opportunity to review that in detail and mark up what they feel is a strength and what they feel is a need for the community. And possibly that would give us a base starting point to identify what our intent is with a capture rate study and where. I trust the recycling partnerships guidelines, but I think it's imperative that we all have some basis point to work from, rather than random thoughts across the board. And I know Karen is going to send those documents out for everybody to review. But I think the feedback from that would be very beneficial to the group trying to identify a base starting point.
I also, to me, the capture rate study, the data that you obtain from that, I would think would help guide what you're going to do. If by, like if we say we're looking for a material that we want in recycling, but we find that, we're only getting 30% of it, 70% of it's going to the trash, that might be a targeted commodity that we would push for, kind of like Denver did with their cans. Or The other side of that is the contamination, and I think that's when the MRFs have to be kind of involved to say, you know what, if this comes out to be captured a lot that and we don't want it, then that would be what we would want to push some education toward. But I feel like the data is going to tell us some of that, right?
You would hope.
Help guide us.
Yeah. So that's part of the mission statement is basically what you said. That's the information that we're hoping to glean out of this.
There was something else I was going to say. Shoot, I lost it. Hang on.
I do agree with Bruce in that I think providing that information to us, letting us see another city's request for bid or just kind of the bullet points that they have in there that they're looking for from whoever this company might be to do those things is just the bare minimum start that we need to have that information in order to create a mission statement, a request for bid, all that stuff I think would be very nice to look off that other information. And I'd also say here with the time frames that we're getting close to that, I'd almost kind of suggest that I know we were looking to move on to shingles and concrete and the other item, but I think we should continue on this topic for the next meeting and use this discussion along with the information you're going to send out and try to focus on coming up with, like Bruce said, like Pete said, maybe a mission statement, an idea, and then maybe even think a little bit more about what regions and areas we would like to choose. So I would like to, I think if we move from this topic to the next topic next week, then things aren't going to get accomplished at all. I think we need to continue to discuss this next week. And I think, like I said, having some information in front of us will help that discussion next week.
I'd also like to say that if this ends up being something that the advisory committee decides we would like to see done and the board approves that, it kind of goes hand in hand with some of our education and outreach materials. So, you know, I don't think that both will come at a cost. So, so I would like to see if the board would approve us to do a capture rate study. I would like for them to kind of a pre-approval that we can actually do some campaigns around the findings. Does that make sense?
I think that we already have.
Okay.
We already have some of that approval with our marketing.
Yeah, that's true, especially through Field Trip and having continuing some campaigns with them. Yeah.
But to go back to Adam and Bruce's comments, I think that's a great track. I agree with Adam. Sticking to the topic might give us better continuity. I don't know about everybody else when you go a month between talking about something or 2 months. You almost have to do half a meeting on review before you start to really get into the nuts and bolts of where you want it to be. So I'm not on the committee, but I like that track.
Adam, if I may make a recommendation, and once we, on the subcommittee, receive the information from Karen, our next meeting will be at a full advisory committee meeting, at which point in time, we should all be able to give feedback to you as to what our wants and wishes are with regard to the recycling partnerships guidelines. And that could be presented to the full advisory committee at next month's meeting. Would that be acceptable?
So if I'm just understanding the meeting schedule correctly, next week we will meet again as a full committee. Not a subcommittee, but a full committee. And then the following month, we'll meet again as a subcommittee. And so Bruce, you'd like for us to have something prepared or ready to talk about in the committee meeting next week pertaining to this?
I would expect that you'll be asked for an update from the subcommittee. So I would
Yeah.
hope that once we get these documents back from Karen, that we can actually reply to you with some comments as waste haulers, as committee members, as to what piques our interest, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think once we look at the information, like you said, maybe you all provide some insight on that. I think we could definitely speak in the full committee meeting as to what we're working on, what the avenue we're looking to go with that. But I do still feel like we'll need another meeting with just the subcommittee to continue to iron out details.
Oh,
Is that-
absolutely. I would agree with you, absolutely, but it would also give the full committee the feeling of involvement. We can gather any input from them as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I don't know if we need to move forward here since it's 4 o'clock, or if I need to, any public input or anyone has anything they'd like to say.
I don't think so. And you already mentioned the meetings. We'll be back together next week as a full committee, and then Wednesday at 4:30, and then June 13th, I believe, will be our next subcommittee time at 3.
Okay,
And I'll send you all some documents.
sounds great. Anything else or any other comments before we adjourn? Hearing none, I guess, what do you, nomination to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Or
I'll
motion to
second.
adjourn, I'm sorry.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
There you go. And
Thanks,
I'd say we're
everybody.
done. And I hope everybody had a successful derby.
Thank you, Pete.
Recycling
Thanks
up.
all.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. See you next week.
All right. Bye-bye.